Hello. I'm hoping you can hear me now. I'm going to go back and share my screen in a minute, but before I do, I just like to apologise. When I share my screen, I can't actually see anything else. So I can't see the chat. So I do apologise about that. I've just been talking to myself for the past 5 minutes. So yes, great start. But anyway, so my name is Maria Basilopoulos and I'm Sales and Marketing Manager for British Library Publishing. That's my day job, and in my study time I'm doing a PhD at UCL, so it's a part-time PhD in the history of the British book trade. And I'm going to tell you how I got to this point and how I'm using my PhD opportunity in my work, and yeah, go from there. And before we start, I just wanted to say that I know that my backstory obviously happened at a time when COVID-19 wasn't a thing, and so but I'm still very much in my career now where COVID-19 is a thing, and it's for example, at the moment I should be in Frankfurt at the book fair, and I'm not, and so I'm having to do 3 weeks worth of meetings, or meetings over 3 weeks that I'd normally do in a week. So things like that, it's a very, very difficult time, and I know it must be difficult for all of you guys as well. So I don't by any means want to come across as someone that's waltzed through my career and kind of not taken that into consideration. So that was the first thing I wanted to say. I just also wanted to say that I will look at the chat after I've done my slides. I can't see it when I share my screen, but I'd love if you asked any questions. I'd be happy to answer them. And if you have a question that you'd really like to ask, but you don't want to ask in front of everyone else, I'm really happy to. I'll be handing my email out to you all, so you can ask me when via email rather than having to do it in front of everybody, if that's what you prefer. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen again, and hopefully I'm going to start by explaining quite how I got into the world of books in the first place, because my family, I come from a working class family. None of my family had gone to university before me. We didn't have a lot of money, so the books that I read I got from the library. I would never even thought of going to university particularly, and you know, I was very much going to go to school and then go and get a job afterwards. So I think the only reason that I knew anything about publishing whatsoever was because of this lady called Robina Green. So Robina Green was a book illustrator, and she was a friend of one of my mum's friends, and she needed a child model for the front cover of 2 books that she was doing for Kingfisher Publishing. And my mum, I think, really just thought, well, it's extra cash. So I know that sounds awful. So yes, I was a child model for these books on the right-hand side, so that I'm actually on the front cover of the books there. And Robina was really nice lady, and she used to show me how the books were put together, and I absolutely loved it. I loved reading as a child, so someone showing me how these books were put together was like a dream come true, and I had no idea about publishing or anything like that. So from the ages of, I was quite young, I was probably about 3 when she first started to draw me, and this was more when I was about 10 or 11, these books. And so over that time she sort of really educated me in publishing, and I really don't think that I would have known anything about it had she not come along and offered to illustrate me. So I sort of owe a lot of it to her, I guess, because yeah, otherwise, as I say, I just don't think I would have even known what the process was. And when I went through school in sort of college and things, I just always wanted to write, and I wanted to read lots of books, so I gravitated towards English literature because that is kind of you know, where you can do that. And I went to university really in the time, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, where it was really encouraged to go. And I went to Bath Spa, and I ended up going through, and I got a 2-2, and I thought, brilliant, that's great, done my degree, tick. And I really didn't think about anything else that I was going to do with that degree. I just thought it's a qualification, and now I'm going to go and get a job. And I hadn't really thought more about working in publishing up until I left university and sort of thought about a career. But I was living in Bath, and there isn't really publishing scene in Bath. There were a few publishers back then, but not really many. So I kind of put it to the back of my mind, and I just tried. I was working in the co-op and trying to find another job, and I decided to apply to Waterstones. So the shop on the left, the bigger shop, with the high street facing windows, was the Waterstones in Bath. And I worked there for about 4 years. I started there as a Christmas temp, and I was in charge of the audio section, which were, I still remember, tapes on one side, CDs on the other side, because that's how long ago it was. So it's about 2003, I think I started in Waterstones. And book selling was, I just absolutely loved it from the moment I started there. It was such an amazing experience to be able to sell books to people who really, you'd make their day. You'd have parents coming in with their children, and they were trying to find like the best book for their children to read. And it's a really serious decision. People, obviously parents are were very concerned, wanted their kids to read well, and it's my responsibility to help. And you got all kinds of customers in, some nicer than others, but they were, it was a really, really fun job. And I really enjoyed working in that shop. In fact, my manager that managed me, she's still there now. So you can see, I mean, that is what, 15 years ago that I started there. So booksellers tend to, if they can, they tend to stay in the job for a long time. And I moved to London halfway. So I worked in bookselling for 8 years, and I moved to London in 2008, mostly because I just wanted to get out of being in a small town, and I wanted to see if I could get a job in publishing. I kind of started to rethink whether or not that's what I wanted to do. I also toyed with doing a master's, and I didn't in the end. And it wasn't because I didn't want to, it was just more because I needed to work full time. So I decided to carry on down the bookselling route, essentially, and move to London. And the store in London compared to the store in Bath was a very different experience. Bath is a very literary town, and when I was there were Waterstones, we had Mr. B's, and we had Toppings, some great bookshops, and we all knew each other. And we had 2 festivals, the Bath Festival and the Children's Festival, that happened every year. And we had a lot of events. We had people like David Attenborough, we had people like Michael Palin, we had sort of Joe Brands, we had all the sort of literary hits of the year coming to the shop and wanting to do events with us, and it was fantastic. The Oxford Street store was very different. It was very that is full of tourists, which was fine, but they all just wanted to know where Primark was most of the time. And our best-selling book was The A to Z of London. So it's a very different experience working in central London to working in a literary, I guess, a literary-esque town. But it was still really good fun. And I didn't take enough photos at the time, really, and these were really quite drab compared to the fun we actually had. But I thought they'd be a sort of indicator that bookselling is not just selling books, although it does sell books. And what I mean by that is, of course we had to sell books, we had to shelve, we had to put the books out, we wrote recommends cards, we hand sold, we had to do loyalty cards and all of that kind of thing. But we also got to do things like International Talk Like a Pirate Day, which is the slide on the bottom left. And we just had such good fun. We all dressed up as pirates for the day, and we did loads of kids events, and we had people dressing up in different costumes and things like that. And it was just ever so much fun. And on the Waterstones Oxford Street window, you can see that there's 2 dresses in the window, and I remember so those dresses were actually from Strictly Come Dancing, when I think it was one of the first when they relaunched the show. And those dresses, it took, I think, about nearly 2 hours to put those dresses on mannequins. Sometimes you'd be jobs like that, and you'd be thinking, crikey, what what have I walked into? It's 10 o'clock in the morning and I'm putting a shiny dress on a mannequin. Is this okay? But it was just really, really good fun. And I guess I would always say to people who are interested in working in the book trade that book selling, and I'm sure there are probably booksellers amongst you, or people that do work in book selling. I say that it's such a fantastic way to get to know the publishing industry. All the publishers, what sells, what doesn't sell, and you meet different publicists, and you go to different events. And I know at the moment it's not quite the same because everything's online, but there are still a lot of events happening. I know Waterstones are doing a lot of on Instagram and Facebook watch parties, and I know that there's other independent bookstores that are doing similar things too. So I just really encourage you, if you're interested, to sort of partake in those opportunities. It was one such opportunity in sort of a live setting that got me my job in my first publisher. So now, it was after an unpaid internship, which I don't really endorse. At the time, it was very uncommon to be paid for an internship, so didn't have a lot of choice. But what I did was I worked 6-day weeks. So I worked 5 days for Waterstones and 1 day a week for the publisher, and I got the job at this because I went to an event. And I met the sales manager, and he said they needed help for a conference that they were doing, and I said, okay, I'm happy to come in 1 day a week, and help you out. So it lasted for around months, and then after that point, they actually offered me a full-time job, and I mean, I'd never sat in an office before, so for me it was I didn't know when I could get up and have a break, or it was very culture shock because after 8 years of book selling. But I really enjoyed working for Abrams and Chronicle, and so all the other imprints that you can see on the other side of the slide, we actually sold those books as well. So we had a huge list. I think we had about 420 books a season. It was absolutely massive, and they were mostly gift and non-fiction illustrated books. But Self-Made Hero, obviously, graphic novels. And Knock Knock and Gallison were stationery imprints. So it gave me a very, very big overview of the industry when I first started as an assistant. And the sort of things I had to do in this job, luckily I didn't get rid of the craziness, because working in the book trade, there are lots of crazy events that you can be part of, making origami Star Wars characters for one of our children's books, and taking those around to bookshops and having kids join in and make their own characters. We actually had the author over for this particular series, and we took him round and we did these events. And so I mean, even working in publishing in the sort of sales department and marketing department, there's never a dull day. So yeah, there's lots of fun sort of things that aren't just sitting at a desk. This I presentations together because Charles Saatchi, with an individual I've worked with, to say the least, and wanted us to come up with a new and innovative way to sell his book. Involved me going to the Bluebird shop in Chelsea with a whole load of bags of sweets, the teeth sweets that have got icing sugar all over them, and jars, and the book. And they showed me in, and they kneeling on the floor, and and trying to make a display out of some clockwork teeth. Apparently he absolutely loved it, because he made me do it in pretty much most of the central London Waterstones windows, which involved me crawling into various different spaces and putting in all of these installations. So yeah, as I say, never a dull day. Unfortunately, I've given you a sneak peek of what happens next, but unfortunately the company decided to shrink because they just had so many imprints, but they just didn't have enough money to keep us all on. And this does happen a lot in publishing. I'm sure you see, if you look at publishers merging together and things like that, it's quite often that the salespeople will be the first people to be made redundant. And I was probably 27 or 28 when that happened to me. And it was a real shock, actually. It was a really horrible time because I'd worked really hard as a bookseller, gone into the industry, was doing all this fun stuff, and then all of a sudden I was doing nothing. And my partner Emma, she actually also works in publishing, and it was really difficult because she was going to work every day and I was not, and it was just a very, very difficult time. But I actually used there's a couple of recruitment agencies in publishing who specify specifically in publishing jobs, and one of them is called Inspired Selection. And I rang them up just to sort of put my CV with them, and they do this thing where they give you like a consultation and they talk you through you know, your opportunities, your CV, your cover letter, and kind of how you can improve it. And that coaching actually really, really helped me. However, I didn't get a job through them. I actually used LinkedIn, and I messaged all of my contacts in LinkedIn. I'd read a post and it just said, just put an in message to everybody. So I thought, okay, I'll give that a go. So I said, oh, hi, I'm looking for work. You know, if you've got anything, let me know. And very luckily, the advertising manager of the bookseller got in touch with me. And I'd only just, I think it was about 3 weeks before, had him into the office to talk about doing some advertising with Abrams. And he'd obviously remembered that, and he said, well, we have got a job, but it's recruitment. And I thought, oh, okay, that's a bit different. It's not publishing, but it is for the bookseller. So just in case you don't know what the bookseller is, I'm sure a lot of you do, but it's the industry magazine. It's been going since 1858. And it's available online, and it's available in print and via newsletter and obviously social media. And at the time, they had a very sorry looking jobs board because the person who had run it for I think a couple of years had run it into the ground, and they didn't really know how to sort of make it more profitable. So they gave it to me and said, here you go, it's a blank canvas. And I thought, oh my goodness, no pressure after being out of work for a few weeks. Luckily only about 3 or 4. I took the job. Didn't really have a lot of choice, to be honest. And they kind of gave me the magazine. So the jobs section has a magazine section and a website and a Twitter feed. And I spent some time thinking about what job seekers actually would want. And I decided that the Twitter feed was really paramount because Twitter was like growing, lots of young people on there that wanted to find jobs and connect with people. And so I started the brand Jobs in Books. So the Twitter feed, I started to talk to job seekers on there, as well as advertise jobs and help people where I could. And I really enjoyed doing that. It was a really fulfilling thing to do. And the other thing that I had was, in the magazine, I decided that it was just really dull, just looking at job panels like one after the other. So I asked if I could do an interview column. And they said, well, that's money, because you take 5 panels out and we won't sell them. And I said, yes, but if we make it more enticing, then people will spend more. So I chose to do a column called My Job in 5, which was 5 questions for people all over the book trade. So they could be in publishing, bookselling, warehousing, printing. And the idea was that job seekers could come and have a look at those interviews, and then they could take away something from that by knowing what the different roles were and kind of knowing if that was something they would be interested in. And it came from when I was made redundant and I was job seeking. I found that there wasn't really that much information out there on my own industry, apart from ringing a recruiter up. So they still run the interview column now, which is really like something I'm really proud of, actually. And the website, I was also rehauled because it was a complete mess. And I think that, you know, the publishers wanted to spend money with me in a way because they knew that they were going to get the coverage. They knew they were going to get tweets. They knew they were going to get an interview with one of their staff, and they knew that people were going to read it. Basically, they were going to read the bookseller and actually apply for the jobs. So I had a great time working there. It was a really, really good role. And it got me to heady heights, such as the Hachette balcony, which was taken just on their opening day when all the staff had just were coming in for their first day in the Hachette offices in Carmelite House. And I even did a My Job in 5 with the Hachette hawk, which if you Google, I'm sure you'll be able to still find somewhere. And the reason I was going and visiting publishers was not only to obviously sell them advertising, because that was my job. I was also interviewing them, and I started writing some articles as well about the different schemes that publishers offered. So Hachette obviously do a very good one still, where they do a working publishing scheme, and Penguin have done, they just started doing it back then, and now theirs has grown massively. And yeah, and so I was kind of at the beginning of all of that happening, which was quite exciting. So I guess if I put this on my CV as a kind of, you know, entry for what I was doing at that time, and I'm sort of halting here because I now need to explain to you why I'm doing a PhD and how I managed to, because as you know, I don't have a master's, and I you know, I wasn't particularly looking for an academic career at all. So yeah, there you go. I started my Twitter feed on Jobs in Books. I created My Job in 5. I worked with the industry bodies. I helped the PA create a publishing apprenticeship. I was just on the board for that. I launched the Society of Young Publishers and Jobs in Books events at London Book Fair. And we did lots throughout the year, including a career speed dating that was quite fun. I gave free advice out as well to people working in the industry. And I also worked with all the UK publishing MA leaders, including the UCL one, known as Samantha Rayner. So I met Samantha Rayner through doing an event, a wider bookseller event, where we did a hackathon, where we had people staying in the, I think it was in the print cafe overnight, like trying to work out, I think it was all based for students, mostly at UCL and other universities, trying to work out how we could future-proof the industry. And so I met Sam there, and we got talking, and we just ended up, I ended up coming into the to UCL and doing some sessions on publishing, and I kind of asked Sam, you know, how do you, you know, is this something, how do you get into doing this, you know, how do these, you know, how can you teach on the publishing MA, and how does that work? And she said, oh, well, you see, you know, you do have to have a PhD. And I thought, well, that's something I'm never going to have, so that's fine, I can just be a guest, that's fine. And then she said, well, no, she said, if you do, if you are interested, there are, you know, you can write about various parts of the industry. And I already did, because I should have said ages ago that I did actually also have a blog. So I used to write about the industry a lot. And I'd bought a book called Bookmakers, which was by Ian Stevenson, who obviously was a professor at UCL. And I found it really interesting because it was all about how the publishing industry had kind of grown in the 20th century. And I kind of got into that and started to sort of write some blog posts around that content. And so Sam and I kept talking, and eventually she sort of said to me, look, you know a lot of stuff about sort of the history of the industry, and you're working at the bookseller. And at the bookseller we had an archive of old magazines, and I'd started to use those in articles and things as well. And she said, you know, if it's something you're interested in, have a think about it. And so yes, and so I did, and I decided that it would be something that I'd be really keen to pursue. And my master's, as it turns out, is my decade of working in publishing and bookselling. So that counted towards points for me to be able to do my PhD. So I'd just like to pause here and say that if I'd been told this when I was handing my CV over at Waterstones in 2004, I don't really think I would have believed this could have happened. So it was an amazing opportunity that I took in 2015. I'm still a student. I'm still writing my PhD now. They take a long time. And I made the move to British Library, and excuse the slide with the advert on. I'm not trying to sell you any books, although if you do want to buy 3 for 2 on our paperbacks, please feel free to visit our shop. But no, joking aside, I became sales manager at British Library Publishing, which is where I work now. And it was quite another strange situation where they obviously advertised the job through me on my jobs board, and I looked at it and I thought, I'm going to apply for that. And that was a bit awkward, but I did, and I got the job. And so now I look after a list of 50 books a year. We do classic crime, we do women's fiction, very excited about women's fiction list that we do, it's fantastic. We do lots of non-fiction, and we use the library's collections in order to make our books. And obviously at the moment it's a very challenging time, so publishing has been one of the areas that has really been helping the library kind of keep up on social media and keep the collections accessible. And also, very importantly, I know no one likes to talk about commerciality, but very importantly, it's making money for the library, because everything we make supports the library and goes back in. So we're not profit turning at all. There's 6 of us in the team, so there's me, I manage all the sales, and I look after 20 reps, and the UK, export, and Australia and American markets. And then we have editorial and production. And my publishing apprentice Thomas as well, who is fantastic and a brilliant support. So the reason I chose to move to the British Library was because, firstly, I wanted to be near the collections, because obviously I was doing my research for my thesis, and secondly, they offer flexi terms on contract, which meant that I could study and work sort of in a way that was a bit more doable than when I was at the bookseller, where the job itself was just too involved, and I was sad to leave, but I had to in the end. So alongside my publishing, and I feel a bit strange doing a kind of This Is Your Life, because I'm not really halfway through my career yet, I suppose. So I thought for this bit I would just very quickly rattle through what I'm trying to do with my PhD, and what my aims are. And I guess in some ways what I'm doing is trying to write up the book trade and trying to talk about the industry and its past. So I've started Book History Bite, which is a blog, and my Twitter name is Book History Bite as well, so just wanted to put that in there. But that is kind of what I'm using my PhD for. My PhD itself is actually on the Victorian and Edwardian kind of commercialisation of the industry. So how books were bought and sold, what bookshops looked like, what sort of libraries were available, what kind of pricing was used. So really the mechanics of the industry is what interests me. And I suppose if you look at my CV, you'll see why I've always worked on that side of it. And also, I've just thrown this in there because a lot of people say to me when I do other research in the sort of about sort of publishing history, they tell me that the 1980s was the heyday, but actually, I mean, look at John Murray's offices in 1906. I mean, what a collection of china that is, and look at that fireplace. And that's a picture of someone very famous that I can't remember, but I'll come back and I'll tell you who it is. I think it might be Scott, actually. And so, it's just fascinating going back into sort of the Victorian era and the Edwardian era and seeing the boom time as I think it was then. And a lot of my research is sort of primary source. Booksellers haven't kept sort of meticulous, neat files of things, so we do find that it's a lot of newspaper articles and a lot of private archives to sort of go through by hand. So it's been a lot of research work. but really good fun. And I've been really lucky because of my job and the fact that booksellers are obviously my customers. A lot of them have been so kind, and I've had access to archives such as the Blackwell's archive, the Heifer's archive, the Hatchard's archive, and I was very, very lucky when I worked for the bookseller, because just before I left, they were moving offices and they basically donated their entire sort of archive library to me. It was pretty much put to me that they were going to throw it away if I didn't take it, so I had to take it. So I've kind of picked things up as I've gone along as well, and occasionally people send me stuff that they find. So this is a selection of postcards that were sent to me by a friend who's a bookseller. Her friend found them in a record shop in a carrier bag, and they are postcards that were sent to Macmillan Publishers in the 1930s, and there's a whole stack of them. So I've got those as well, and just lots of little bits like that that I've picked up. I also do work with the Society of Young Publishers, because as I mentioned, I worked with them when I was at the bookseller, and for their 70th birthday in 2019, they asked me to look at their archive, which was in a load of boxes, and try and make some sense of it and put something together for their magazine imprint. So they, I love this photo. They dropped the archive off to me looking very dishevelled. And I spent a few months putting it nicely into folders, obviously not messing with the origination of it, but kind of just making it more accessible. And the idea is that eventually we will put this archive in Stationers' Hall so that everybody can access it. I used it to write a 70th birthday special for their magazine, and I still write pieces for them every single time the magazine comes out. So do look out for those if that's of interest to you. And here is, I took a selection of the archive with me to their AGM, and sorry, this photo is a bit dark, but I took some bits and pieces out, and you can see some old editions of the imprint magazine there, which were looked at all through the evening, which was lovely. And another project I'm working on is the Book Society Centenary, which is next year. So the Book Society are, how do I put this? They are sort of the older sort of industry members who have been around for quite some time, probably founded quite a lot of the publishers that we know today, that could possibly still be alive to be part of a society. And obviously through the history of their society, lots of famous names are in there, authors and publishers. And the idea of the Book Society is they have a dinner every month, and they have a talk which nobody is allowed to take beyond the four walls of the Savile Club. And so they asked for somebody to do the history, and my old boss at the bookseller recommended me, and that's going to be published next year, which is quite exciting. So just to give you a little sneak peek of some of the things that I've got, these are pamphlets that the society would have handed out to their members on all different sorts of topics. In a lot of ways, there were lots of men in the society. It was a male-only society until the 1970s. So lots of men trying to fix the industry with pamphlets. So yes, but some fascinating stuff in there all the same. And it started in 1921, so it goes back that full 100 years. And then the other project that I've worked on with Sam Rayner, and Sam Rayner actually started the Bookselling Research Network last year. And if you're interested in any of the sort of history of bookselling, it's really worth going onto the website, because we've kind of been collating an archive that anyone can access digitally via Zotero, and you can kind of go on, and there's all different kind of records of different bookshops and different ways that books have been sold in the past. So just a quick shout out for Bookselling Research Network, because it's We're going to do lots of different activity over the next year, and we are affiliated with the Booksellers Association as well. So yeah. So there's some of the projects I'm working on now, and I'm hoping that in, I don't know, 20 years time, when I do something like this again and I'm kind of old and grey and, you know, being wheeled out to talk about my career if I'm still in the industry, I'll have a sort of, this will all be part of sort of like my part one that I did for you today. So this is all work in progress at the moment, but all very exciting. And as I said, my email address is on the end of my slides here, and I have just included some links of in industry associations that I've spoken about and some that I haven't, that I think you might find useful. The bookseller actually included their discount code for me to give to you all, which is Student Deal. They do charge for subscriptions, but you can also access their newsletters for free. You just have to sign up to them on their website. So, but if you want to have a student subscription, then please do use that code on their website. And I just also wanted to do a little shout out for some people that I thought you might follow on Twitter, or you might already follow. Pub Interns is a really good Twitter feed for job hunting advice from those that have been through it, and they talk a lot about like transparency with pay, like how much people get paid in the industry and things like that. So I'd really recommend them. Also Carl, who is at That Pub Blogger, he works in publishing and he tweets and blogs about job hunting. He's also current chair of the SYP UK, and just very knowledgeable and does a lot of good stuff. And Sam Missingham, who I'm sure you've all heard of, Sam at Lounge. I used to work with her at the Bookseller, and she has got a website called theempoweredauthor.com. So I recommend checking that out. And yeah, I'm going to stop talking now and stop sharing and see if I can come back to the chat. Oh, thanks, Christia. Oh, thanks, Kira. Yeah, my job in 5. I'm really pleased you find it helpful. That was kind of my aim. So that's really nice to hear. And what's this from Anish? Publishing is a really difficult industry to get into. What would you recommend for work experience programs, schemes, and skills for a job? So I think I would say that the bigger publishers will have the fairest employment schemes, if that makes sense. So I think Penguin, Hachette, HarperCollins are definitely worth having a look at, and they have loads of resources now on their websites for job seekers. So even if you don't you don't apply for a job with them, you can still get some really interesting information from looking at their websites. And it is a really difficult industry to get into, and unpaid internships are becoming, luckily, a little bit lesser. That the more publishers are realizing they do have to pay. So the other thing I would suggest is a lot of them do tend to advertise these opportunities on Twitter first and foremost, to see if they get any kind of traction there. But it could also be worth having a look at individual publishers' websites and looking at whether or not they've got a jobs page, to see if you could apply before they start putting it on social media. Because I think as soon as they put it on Twitter, they get about sort of 700 people trying to apply. So if you can try and keep an eye out every day, maybe, for opportunities. And I think the SYP has a jobs board, which is really good, and I recommend subscribing to them, because not only will you get the jobs board, you'll also get support, and you'll also be speaking to people who are in the same boat as you. And I think sometimes it's useful to have a community around you, so you don't feel like I know you're all a lot of you are probably doing the publishing MA, but it's also nice to extend out into the community, and there might be people who get jobs before you who might be able to recommend you for positions. And I know that's not necessarily very ethical, but that still does happen in publishing and isn't necessarily a bad thing. So and skills for a job into publishing, I would say there's editorial and then there's the commercial side, and the two do require different skills. So editorial is sort of very accurate. You have to have a good sense of accuracy, proofreading, the ability to read very quickly, the ability to multitask and project manage a book from the beginning of it being commissioned to the end of it being produced. And sales and marketing is, you've got to have a creative flair and kind of really know what's going to sell, and kind of be able to seek out new trends, and kind of watch what other people are doing, and kind of know what the competition's doing as well. But I think it is worth, if you're not sure where you fit, I would really recommend speaking to a recruitment agency, because they really will be able to sit with you and give you the time to kind of work out where your skills are best fit, your skills best fit. So I hope that's helpful. And if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer them, but if not, then that's also fine. Okay, I don't think there's any other questions then in that case, so I'm happy to leave it there, and I really hope that you've enjoyed my talk, and that you got something out of it. Is it possible? Oh, okay, we've got another question here. Is it possible to get recruited without any experience? Yes. Penguin are starting to, I don't know if you've seen, but Penguin have started to advertise for entry-level roles very specifically. Without, they've said on Twitter they don't want people that have got previous publishing experience. They're asking anyone to join. I think the thing that helps with applying for publishing roles is to try and forget that they want someone that's already done the role. So to try and look at your own experience and your own transferable skills, and to kind of be able to give them examples of yes, I haven't sold a book, but I've sold trainers. And I know, and for me, customer service is really important, and making sure good quality products are going onto the market is really important. Or I haven't marketed. I remember once there was this girl who, she got a job at Penguin, and she got like a marketing executive role, and I said, oh, what, she said, oh, I've only been in the job a few days. I think I was at a conference, and I said, oh, what did you do before? And she said, oh, I used to work for a glue manufacturer. And so obviously in her cover letter or CV, she managed to use that experience to explain to Penguin that she could also market their product. And I think that is what you want to try and do. So Bethany, do I have any tips for applications and interviews? How do you make your CV stand out? I think you should not be, I think you shouldn't shy away from your experience that you have, and to not kind of try and bookify everything. So if you have experience from another industry, then don't be scared to say it. Don't be scared to bring it to the table. I think for CVs you should have a personal statement at the top that's not very long, maybe a couple of sentences, that just gives an indication of the kind of character traits that you want to get over for the hirer to see. So motivated, all of those kind of words are really important. So you want to sell yourself, and you have to use those couple of sentences to do so. And I think relevant experience, it doesn't have to be that you've done publishing roles, but just if you've come out of university and you've worked for a society at university, put that down as a job role, and say that it involved team building work, and I had to project manage a trip to wherever, or use all those resources. And I think when you're doing your cover letters, I used to give this advice all the time, which is a cover letter really should be answering the job description, as a sort of like answering all the questions on a job description. So I would if you take the application, put it into a Word document, and then work out what they're asking for, and then answer. So say, yes, I am this person, yes, I do have this skill. And so I guess if, for an example, we're looking for a creative marketing director who is highly motivated, or something like that. You could say, I'm a highly motivated marketing professional looking for my next step in my career. And then you've kind of answered the question, because you've said that you're going to step up and you want the interview. And I think also allow some of your CV points to be left so that you do have something to talk about in the interview, so you're not just giving them everything in one go, as well. And I always say, don't put photos on your CV, because it encourages unconscious bias, and it's not a requirement. And so I would say, you don't need to show people what you. I've heard of publishers in the past who have actually used the photographs of people to work out. They've actually asked for photographs of people in an application, and then worked out who they'd like to work with based on their looks. So yeah, avoid all kinds of that way. I would as well. Trying to think if I've got anything else. Yeah, I think. I mean, I'm not really I'm not really an expert in terms of CVs and applications, so I am only really telling you what I think is correct. But I do really recommend talking to either Inspired Selection or Atwood Tate, or another good publishing recruiter, because they'll be able to give you proper advice, and kind of talk you through it, knowing your individual kind of circumstances. So yes. And yeah, so if there's any last questions, I'm happy to take any more, but if not, then I will let you go and get on with your evenings. Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. It's been really good fun. It's been a bit unnerving, because I obviously can't see or hear any of you. So I do hope that I wasn't talking too fast and that you did actually enjoy it. So yeah, thank you so much for turning up.